Well, ladies and gentlemen, there has been a little bit of a lull in the potential new Cleveland Browns stadium news. We got that one blurry rendering. I thought they would all get leaked. It never happened. That was over 2 months ago at this point. But now we do have some legitimate news. Possibly another area in Cleveland, basically like right to the east of where the current Cleveland Browns stadium. Could that be the Browns' new home, possibly even closer to Lake Erie? Now, one of the big issues I think with Cleveland Browns Stadium is where it is located is the furthest point north. It was previously Cleveland Municipal Stadium, so I do find it a little bit curious, but this could potentially be another leverage play by Haslam to try and get more money from Brook Park. We know he wants a $2.4 billion stadium with the public funding around 1.2, so half of it. It says Haslam's mini downtown at Brook Park or Burke. Burke meaning the small airport. I believe it's private. It only lands small planes, and it's right along the lake. But this is an article. Let's take a look. 24 stadium area buildings possible. So they're making a big deal about the potential entertainment surrounding the stadium. I think it's very normal. Like I would say if Haslam wanted to develop like a skyscraper right next to the stadium, that would be notable, a big casino, something like that. To me, it just seems like it's pretty standard, the stadium development around, which is what we've seen recently with all the buildings surrounding the stadiums, whether you want to call them ballpark villages, stadium villages, but that's what's been going on. I don't think it's crazy that Haslam wants this. It would be crazy if he wanted like a skyscraper or something attached to the stadium. From what I've seen, that's not what he wants. It's more of just a standard, stadium village around it, which will potentially help attract more people to the area. The Haslam Sports Group plans more than $1 billion worth of new development surrounding their new proposed dome stadium, but is that necessarily going to be in the Cleveland suburb of Brook Park? With an emerging effort by city officials to close and redevelop Burke Lakefront Airport, look for that site to be offered up as a location for the stadium and supportive development. Rumors are circulating that both could happen. And I've also heard the idea, because the development is going to take a little bit longer with the airport, they could renovate Cleveland Browns Stadium, maybe not dump $1.2 billion into the renovation, because that's what it would be if they decide to stay at Cleveland Browns Stadium. It would be less than that, but it would just be to tide the Browns over for a potential longer development right at the airport. And you can see via the aerial shots, I mean, that is a lot of land, obviously, considering it's a runway, but even to the north of it, you can see a bunch of undeveloped like swampland, and there's been multiple renderings about trying to redevelop this airport into its own like swamp or sanctuary or public park. That could be another option, but there is a lot of undeveloped lakefront land in Cleveland. You're just seeing more of it because technically there's undeveloped lakefront land to the north of Cleveland Browns Stadium. It is just, I guess you can say it's a parking lot, but obviously if they were to do the $1.2 billion renovation to the Browns Stadium, which is still an option, although it doesn't seem likely considering we're now getting multiple different areas for a potential new stadium, including this one in Cleveland. So they would be developing that area in between the Browns Stadium and Lake Erie. That's where the main development would happen. We do also have news from 3 sources that Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb may be close to announcing a plan for closing Burke and replacing it with a development and recreational spaces. A month ago, the city was ready to announce the plan, but a source said the city officials pulled it back at the last second for unknown reasons. So that area is probably going to be redeveloped from the small airport into some type of park or, redevelopment, maybe with some buildings. But could the Browns Stadium possibly go there? How close to Lake Erie would it be? And obviously it would be a dome. There's no doubt about that. They're not going to deal with another open stadium right next to Lake Erie, considering normally at least 2 or 3 Browns home games a year, you're dealing with pretty bad weather. Any Burke closure plans depends on the funding improvements to the Cuyahoga County Airport and possibly other small airports in the region. So we will have to see if this airport does end up closing. The article also says it makes sense that the city may have offered Burke as a site for the Haslams to develop. The city wants to keep the Browns and its stadium in Cleveland, but the Haslams want more land than what the city had previously offered to achieve its ambitious development vision. That's why the Haslams reportedly have a purchase agreement for 176 acres in Brook Park, which is interesting because if you look at Brook Park, technically there's a bunch of signs within the property. It's abandoned right now. It's just undeveloped. but it says it's for sale. So I guess it is an agreement, but it's not official. There's still a bunch of signs surrounding that area saying the land is for sale. Although the city cannot legally sell land that was reclaimed from Lake Erie, it can lease it. Brook was constructed by extending the shoreline out into the lake by using landfill. Under a master development agreement, the city could lease this former submerged land to the Haslams for a nominal fee, possibly like $1 per year, so nothing for 99 years. The incentive would be it would keep the Browns in Cleveland, and Haslam would have enough land to potentially that is interesting. So if it's a landfill, there could be a problem about putting a stadium out there, considering this was ocean, considering this was, the lake, and considering this was the lake. So you'd have to think there might be a problem with, in terms of the foundation sinking, when you are building on top of a landfill. Maybe they would build the stadium a little bit more inland, and then the main village would be right next to the stadium. That could be another thing. I mean, it would be pretty cool to have that development. I mean, technically, you could get that at Cleveland Browns Stadium. The only difference is you wouldn't be having a new stadium, right? That's the only difference, because there is an area, in between Browns Stadium and the lake that can be redeveloped, and it's right next to the stadium, and it would look really nice if you're able to develop it the right way. But the Browns would still have their same stadium, which I personally don't think is that bad. But they clearly want some type of new stadium or some type of renovation. I think they really want this new stadium. And it does seem like this article is hinting at possibly in the future this potentially becoming a site. It's weird that they're saying they're going to announce that they're going to redevelop the land, and then also saying the Browns could potentially have their new stadium there. But maybe it could be a thing where they announce it and then the Browns get involved, and then there's some type of bidding war that Haslam can set up between Cleveland and also Brook Park. Interesting, they also reported the only reason Haslam did not build or is not planning to build a new stadium in Cleveland is because of limited land space, and this could hypothetically solve that problem with the crazy amount of land that they have with that airport closing. I mean, there's a massive runway there. There's going to be a lot of land, and that can also help the situation move on. Where should the stadium be built? In Brook Park, next to a Ford engine plant and across railroad tracks right next to the airport. The main issue with that site is that, yes, there still is one of the engine plants. There was another one that was even bigger, and they knocked it down, and that's part of the undeveloped land where the stadium would go. But there still is a massive building that is an engine plant for Ford that hypothetically would be not right next to the stadium. The stadium would be nestled closer to the airport. It would probably, what they probably would do, I would imagine there would be a bunch of parking right next to that engine plant, because if you look at the aerial shots of the potential new stadium, there's a lot of parking. And obviously, if you build the new stadium in Cleveland, you can eliminate a ton of that parking. A lot of these stadiums want to completely eliminate, like, most of their parking lots. It's just a sea of parking. It looks bad. With something like the Brook Park development, it did surprise me the amount of parking that they had in that, aerial shot of like the layout of shot of what it could look like, because it's right next to an airport and people are just using public transportation to get to their hotel, because I'm sure there'd be a bunch of hotels that get built there if the stadium is there. And there's really no need for, a car. But obviously people are coming from other suburbs around Brook Park, also coming from Cleveland. That's where, they don't have the proper public transportation set up to really, whenever there's a stadium in a suburb, there's going to be problems in terms of transportation, which inevitably is going to cause them to add more parking, because it's just in a more obscure location than a major city that has the infrastructure to have the public transportation and things along those lines. So this is very interesting. I do wonder, we haven't even gotten the actual renderings for the Brook Park thing. I'd like to see those if we could get them. But how about renderings for a new stadium at that airport location with all of that shoreline? Germany in the 1930s had a similar problem. They wanted to build a massive hall. It would be like the biggest dome in history. And Berlin is on swampland. So it would have been an issue. But apparently I've read that they would have been able to do it and it would still be fine to this day. So maybe it's overblown, like building on a landfill or building on swampland. You can potentially do it. It just depends. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.